Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some incredibly fun battles in the Open Master League, featuring my XL 2500 CP ALOLAN Ninetales. Now, ALOLAN Ninetales is at Ultra League CP. It absolutely should not be used under any circumstances in the Master League, but we're going hunting for flying types and dragon types. I paired it up with a Giratina and a Mamoswine, and actually somehow went positive across 3 sets. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out XL ALOLAN Ninetales in the Master League. Hopping to the first match, we see a core breaker on the lead, Giratina Origin into Palkia. Palkia, of course, can hit both Giratina and the Mamoswine for super effective damage, so not a fun Pokemon to encounter on the lead. Shadow Ball will grab an early shield, these Dragon Tails adding up quite a bit. Odds are they're going to look to go for the Aqua Tail and the Farm Down. So I'm actually going to save my Giratina and now send in Mamoswine. Mamoswine, of course, would not appreciate the super effective damage from the Aqua Tail, so I will commit the shield. Palkia staying in this matchup, so you know what? I'm going straight for the Avalanche here. Avalanche will be lethal if they let it through, which they do. Goodbye, Palkia. In comes Melmetal. I am incredibly happy to see the Melmetal here and not against my ALOLAN Ninetales. I'm shielding no matter what. They do go for the superpower. I'm farming up and I'm going for the high horsepower. No baits here. Do they respect it? They do not. In the back, it's a Landorus, the perfect Pokemon, and we catch the superpower onto Giratina, and it's ALOLAN Ninetales time. In comes the Ninetales. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Picking up a fairly neutral lead in the next match, Giratina Origin into Groudon. The nice thing is Giratina is able to tank Precipice Blades in this matchup, but that still does monster damage, so I don't necessarily want to tank one. So I am going to commit a shield. They full send the Precipice Blades, and now they save switch into Lugia. No baits here, going straight for the Shadow Ball. Opponent is going to let that through. I'm farming up energy with the Giratina, and now I can send in Mamoswine. Mamoswine making it to the Avalanche. They have a lot of energy on the Lugia. They want to preserve it, so they will commit their first shield. I continue to farm. Opponent ends up giving me a Powder Snow for free, which is quite nice, and I end up calling the Sky Attack bait. That is huge. I'm going to shield because I think I can farm down here. If I can farm down, I should be in a pretty nice spot here. Mamo gets the farm down, and I leave with the double Avalanche to punish the Groudon. Opponent, they're thinking about it. They send in the Groudon, but they switch into Dialga at the last possible second as I go for the Avalanche. Very, very nice catch by my opponent. I am firing off the Avalanche. That's going to get the Dialga low, and now I can send in the Ninetales. Ninetales Powder Snows down before they make a move. Back in comes the Groudon. I'm going to be spamming out super effective Weather Balls and looking to try and potentially make a catch. I farm up, switch into the Giratina. Unfortunately, I do not get the Fire Punch catch. Opponent fires off their Precipice Blades, but that will not KO. A Shadow Ball would KO here, so this feels like a pretty safe bait to me, and now this will force them to throw sooner. Opponent is going to throw on the CMP tie. They do not have a Precipice Blades loaded as well, which means I can send back in the Ninetales and go for the Weather Ball. Groudon may be 2,000 CP bigger than the A9, but it's not going to matter, and that's a good game. Hopping into the next match, leading Giratina Origin into Zacian. This matchup depends heavily on the moveset of the Zacian, and they're running Snarl. When a Zacian's running Snarl, you can very safely assume that they're running Play Rough as well, so this Zacian does have the tools needed to inflict massive damage on the Giratina. The nice thing is, Giratina is quite tanky, so they can go for the super effective Play Rough. I'm able to tank it, and I can make it to the Shadow Ball. There, I definitely should have done one more Shadow Claw before I threw. As you can see, I give them an entire Snarl for free. They try and farm down, but at the last second, they're going to snipe with their own Giratina, and now I can send in Mamoswine. I'm fine no shielding here because a close combat is going to do more, and what I should do is throw 6 Powder Snows and CMP tie with the Giratina. But as you see, I throw 5, and that ends up being an extremely costly mistake because I don't have an Avalanche here to potentially force CMP against the Zacian, and Zacian has back-to-back charge moves. So now I just have to hope that this Powder Snow, after they debuff themselves, will be enough to KO, which it is not, and I'm forced to burn both shields on a very low health Mamoswine. In the back, they have Groudon. I'm now at the back-to-back avalanches, but they have the fire punch. I'm going to look to catch onto the A9 here. I go for the catch onto the A9. I'm not able to get it. Opponent will just go for the Precipice Blades. This will KO. The question is, will the avalanche be enough? This is super effective damage. Come on, Mamoswine. Will it KO? It barely does not. And we lose a heartbreaking game. We see mirror leads in the next match, Giratina Origin versus Giratina Origin. I'm going to stay in this matchup to start, but I will eventually need to save switch into the Mamoswine to check and see if my opponent has an ice counter in the back. I am going to respect the potential Shadow Ball, but I get baited with an Ominous Wind. Definitely not ideal. I'm going to bait back. Ominous Wind gets the shield, and now I am going to pivot into Mamoswine. Mamoswine farming up, going for the Avalanche, and winning CMP over the Giratina. Avalanche from the Mamoswine will grab the final shield from my opponent. And you know what? If they're staying in, my hope is that they're weak to Mamo, so I'm going to shield back. They now send in Dialga, but Dialga will get outpaced and Mamoswine makes it to the high horsepower. This will hit for massive damage onto Dialga, but the Dialga with 1 HP hangs on, makes the Iron Head, and will grab the KO. But now I can bring back in my own Giratina and get an energy lead, and this is very big, as this is going to allow me to outpace my opponent's Giratina, make the Shadow Ball, this will KO, and now I have a pretty healthy Giratina and an entire Ninetales versus their final Pokemon, which is Lugia, and this game is over. I'm going to be firing off the Shadow Ball here, looking just to get some chip damage onto the Lugia. They're going to be forced to throw a charge move here, which they do, and then in comes the ALOLAN Ninetales. In comes the Ninetales, double resisting the Dragon Tails. Ninetales farming up, will be hit with the Sky Attack here. Keep in mind, this is an Ultra League Pokemon, so that does so much damage, even from a Lugia. But Ninetales hangs on, KOs with a Weather Ball, and secures the win. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Giratina Origin into Palkia. As I mentioned earlier, Palkia is a very annoying Pokemon for this team to face, as it does well into both the Giratina and the Mamoswine. I'm going to be firing off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball does a lot of damage to the Glassy Palkia, so Palkia will commit a shield. I continue to farm, I make it to the Shadow Ball, my opponent is going to win CMP. But I'm perfectly fine with shielding here, because that means I'm going to be able to get my second Shadow Ball off. Shadow Ball into the Palkia is going to connect. I send in the Ninetales, looking for them to throw their energy, but my opponent hangs on to their energy, which is honestly a pretty nice read by them. And they're going to send in Zacian. I'm going for the Dazzling Gleam here. Dazzling Gleam onto the Zacian does about 40%, which is honestly pretty good considering the massive difference in combat power. They go for the player off. That does so much damage. There, I actually waited a turn to force a CMP tie on the off chance they were running Wild Charge, but unfortunately no Wild Charge to be seen. They're firing off another charge move here, and it turns out they do have Wild Charge. Oh my goodness, they're actually not running close combat, which means I can farm down with the Mamoswine. They try and snipe with the Aqua Tail. They get KO'd, and they concede the match. Picking up a very nice lead in the next match, Giratina Origin into Ho-Oh. And Ho-Oh is not switching out, which is pretty nice for me, considering that I have 2 ice types in the back that would get shredded by Incinerate. I'm going for the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball does big damage. Ho-Oh throws 1 more Incinerate, and they're going to be returning fire with a Brave Bird. Brave Bird does a lot of damage to the Giratina. They're staying in this matchup, so I'm going to build up and then fire off the Ominous Wind. They're debuffed. This will KO, and let's see what they have. In comes Dialga. I'm going to bring in Mamoswine. Mamoswine farming up a lot of energy. Typically, you are going to want to go for triple Avalanche in this matchup. I did switch in, which means I am slightly behind, which could prevent me from reaching the 3rd Avalanche. We're going to have to see. I'm firing off the 1st Avalanche. Opponent calls that it's not the high horsepower. A pretty nice read by my opponent. I'm going for Avalanche number 2 here. Avalanche will connect. Mamoswine dies with the move. That's a bit unfortunate. I'm going to send in the Giratina just to force them to empty their energy, and then I have to trust in the Ninetales. In comes the Ninetales. It's Kyogre in the back, and I concede the match. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Giratina Origin versus Giratina Origin. I'm going to be staying in this matchup to start, building up to the Shadow Ball, and going for the Ominous Wind. While playing this team, I was getting non-stop baited in the Giratina Origin Mirror. I'm able to grab a shield from my opponent, so in this game, I decided to be a little risky. I'm actually going to call the bait here, and the opponent baits. That's huge. We go for the Shadow Ball, and we win the coin flip CMP tie. Things suddenly looking amazingly good for us, as we've gotten both shields from the opponent. I unfortunately have lost my Giratina, but Mamoswine up 2 shields is an absolute menace. So I'm going to send in the Mamoswine, shield their first charge move, and look to farm up a massive amount of energy. Opponent is going to full send the Shadow Ball. I'm not quite going to be able to farm down before they make another charge move, so I will fire off the Avalanche at the last second. Avalanche will easily KO. Opponent sends in Zacian, and bad news for the opponent here. I think this is going to be a Mamoswine sweep. Avalanche gets them low. We make it to the second Avalanche before they make the close combat. Goodbye, Zacian. In the back, it's an Excadrill, and the opponent concedes the match. Picking up a terrible lead in the next match, Giratina Origin into Dragonite. Immediate save switch into Mamoswine, and my opponent responds with Heatran. Things going from bad to worse. I'm firing off high horsepower. This will hit for double super effective damage, and I'm able to grab a shield from the Heatran. Heatran continues to farm. They're going for the Magma Storm, and I'm just going to let this go. I got shield advantage, which is honestly just about as good as I can ask for, and now I just have to trust that with the Fire Steel type Heatran out of the way, that my Ultra League Ninetales can put in work in the end game. I'm farming up with the Giratina and going for the Shadow Ball. Heatran has some pretty nice bulk to it, able to withstand that Shadow Ball, make it to another Stone Edge, and this is going to be really close. I need my Giratina to survive. Giratina survives and makes the ominous wind. That is massive. Now I can get rid of the Heatran and up a shield. I have Ninetales in the back. It's a Lugia. Oh my goodness. Opponent running ABA Flyer, and they're about to get punished by an Ultra League Pokemon. Sky Attack is going to connect, and I have so much energy on the Ninetales. Weather Ball does absolutely nothing to the Lugia, but speaking of doing absolutely nothing, these Dragon Tails heavily resisted by the Fairy typing. Ninetales in a fantastic position to sweep the Lugia and the Dragonite after. I'm going to be shielding and just looking to overfarm as much as I possibly can here. I'm farming up, going for the Weather Ball, and at this point, I think my opponent recognized what was about to happen, and as you're going to see, they end up closing their app rather than watch themselves get KO'd by an Ultra League Pokemon. We had so much energy on the Ninetales. The Dragonite is dry. As you can see here, opponent has left. They bring back in the Dragonite. I decided to go for the Dazzling Gleam. It's only single super effective instead of the Weather Ball being double super effective, but I figured may as well have some fun with it. And then we are going to get to Powder Snow down the 4200 CP Dragonite and get the win. Hopping into the final match, we see a terrific lead. Giratina Origin into Kyogre. Opponent save switches into Lugia, and I'm going to stay in with the Giratina and go for the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball does massive damage into the Lugia here. My opponent will respect it with a shield. But the good news is I have a lot more damage with Mamoswine entering the field. This is enough for the Aeroblast. I do get baited, but honestly, that's okay. Like, being baited here, I'm going to have to tank a Sky Attack, but a Sky Attack is something that Mamoswine will be able to survive. This is just going to be the Sky Attack, so I can let this go, and my hope is that I leave with enough energy to be able to make it to a high horsepower versus the Kyogre. Back in comes the Kyogre, and that is crucial damage here. Making the high horsepower, that's going to put them in a range where a single charge move will KO. In the back, it's Dialga. Wait. This is actually bad. Ninetales wants nothing to do with these double super effective Iron Heads. I farm up a ton of energy here, and I end up playing to a CMP tie that I do not win. I'm going to shield the Iron Head, and I'm just going to need to start spamming out Weather Ball after Weather Ball. Weather Ball number 1 is going to connect. The Powder Snow's adding up on the Dialga. I'm going for going for Weather Ball number 2, and I do get the shield. Going for Weather Ball number 3 now. This is going to be getting Dialga very close to the red health. farming up here. Perfect counting from my opponent, over farming to the max and going for the Iron Head as I make my next move. Iron Head will be lethal. Back in comes the Giratina. I'm going for the Ominous Wind here. I need to get rid of the Dialga. Dialga gets KO'd, but Kyogre has energy. In comes the Kyogre. Kyogre firing off a charge move. Can I survive a Surf here? This is going to be close. Surf does not KO. Giratina makes the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball KOs Kyogre. And against all odds, we secure the win. All in all, I had an absolute blast getting to bring another Ultra League Pokemon into the Master League, and it definitely bullied some flying types along the way. As I mentioned at the beginning, I definitely do not recommend using an Ultra League ALOLAN Ninetales in the Master League. It's not going to win you a lot of games. I did go positive with this team. I went 9-6, but that's mainly due to the fact that Mamoswine and Giratina form a pretty nice core. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We're making a push towards 50,000 subscribers at the end of the year, so if you could hit that sub button, it would mean the world. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is absolutely incredible, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.